Okay, perfect. Well, greetings and thanks to all of you for being here. And thank you, Mark, for inviting me again. We've had a bit of a series of kind of presentations and conversations related to all manner of topics related to kind of people and employment over the years. And so I'm delighted to have the chance to kind of exchange ideas with all of you. And to hopefully spark your thinking about some elements of what it takes to not only build a culture that really is a culture that supports and unlocks the genius in all of your people, but also to think about the notion of kind of hiring and retaining and inspiring people, especially in the world that we're in today. As I had talked to Mark prior to kind of organizing the session, I would really prefer to be in person with all of you, but for various reasons, most of which having something to do with COVID, we're kind of in this virtual format. Having said that, I'm grateful for the technology. Are we using Zoom or one of these other platforms? Because it's proven to us that we're able to kind of connect and share information and do a lot of things and be remote. But I mentioned that, we're virtual, as you all know, because we're kind of in what I like to call the post-COVID world, which is kind of a funny world. It's kind of a gray world. People are still getting COVID. People are still concerned about COVID. People are traveling in varying degrees. People are wearing masks in varying degrees. But the post-COVID world, in which we're getting to kind of a new normal, has a lot of implications for all of us, especially as it relates to the world of work, as you're seeing. And what I want to talk about today are some things that are fundamental to kind of building a culture and engaging and keeping and getting the best out of people. I have to be honest, as I was putting my notes together, what dawned on me is I wouldn't have said much that was different prior to COVID, actually. I'm going to share with you some basic principles I want you to think about that I've been working on for a long time. So I wouldn't have done much that was really different, but COVID has made it all a bit nuanced. And so to put the kind of 800-pound gorilla out in front of us, I think the main thing that's come from COVID, aside from a lot of challenges for an awful lot of people, is the notion that people have now, especially a new generation, but not just a new generation of people, that work is actually kind of what you do as opposed to where you do it. And so I want you to think a little bit about that, because it has certainly implications for all kinds of people who don't do jobs where you actually have to be face-to-face with people. We would talk a lot about COVID everywhere, and occasionally I would bring some of my COVID conversations home, and I would mention what people were talking about to my wife, who's a nurse, and she would look at me and say, yeah, the only change I had with COVID, other than having to go in the hospital 4 days a week, was that a lot of my patients had COVID, actually. And so the reality is that we have to distinguish between those people who have to go to jobs where they have to interact with people, retail, lots of other professions, healthcare, and those people who have the luxury of not having to go in, professional workers, often white-collar workers. People who have the luxury have said, which is kind of interesting, all of you guys, especially those of us with gray hair, or those of us who have a bit of hair left that's gray, what in the world were you thinking for all these years, making people go into a workplace for 5 days a week? You got to be insane. Why did I have to do that? I don't need to be there 5 days a week. I can be perfectly productive, my dining room table, at the local Starbucks, on the sofa. I just have to look good from the waist up. So I don't know how many of you are wearing pajama bottoms, beneath your nice kind of blouses or sweaters. And so that's an interesting thing, is people have questioned kind of where they do work and whether they can get work done. There's another huge implication of that as it relates to employers. And the huge implication is, if I'm no longer kind of tethered to the office, if I'm not there 5 days a week, if I'm working from home, if all these tools that all of you know about, like Indeed and LinkedIn, are sending me notes because they've used AI to scour my resume and think I might be great someplace else. And they've suddenly said to me, hey, you want to come and work at a different place for $10,000 to $15,000 more? And I'd like to buy a new car, and that would be a pretty good down payment. I have a whole different kind of world to think about. The other thing that's interesting from an employer perspective is I might think differently about how I source talent, because I might be able to find the best people in all kinds of different places. And some of those people may be more affordable. We'll talk about compensating people in a moment, because they've decided that they want to live in Bloomington, Indiana, or Pittsburgh, which is the lowest cost big city in America. And they can work kind of remotely. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So there are a lot of those things going on. Well, let me backtrack for a second and simply share. Mark mentioned a little bit about, I run a strategy and innovation consulting firm based in the Washington, D.C. area. Our customers are mostly based in the Washington, D.C. area, but also around the U.S. and around the world. And we help companies basically figure out how to kind of think differently, innovate, and grow. And as part of that, we try to get companies to figure out how they unlock the genius in all of their people, how they find the best people and inspire people. And we've also been asked by an awful lot of our customers since COVID happened to help them think out about how they should be organized in a world of work in which a lot of people are remote. How do they keep people connected? So some of the ideas I'm going to share with you are kind of based on that. But I want to begin for those of you who have been in presentations I've given before, whether they're in person or virtual, you know that I use a lot of props and I tell some stories, and the stories are meant to get you to think differently. And so I want to begin with a story that actually sums up a lot of the things that I want to talk about. And the story actually can take place in Georgetown, or I think at Montgomery Mall or Tyson's Corner, or on Oxford Street in London. And it's a story based on a company that I find to be remarkable, though when I walk in, they don't look at me like, whoa, he's the target customer, and that's Lush Cosmetics. And so how many of you have ever been to a Lush store? Any of you? Okay. So Lush kind of caters to younger people. So Lush is kind of a mostly natural personal care products company. But what I want you to think about, and Lush does all kinds of awesome things really well. You walk into every Lush store, and actually its vision and mission and values are written in chalk all around the store. The folks who work there are a truly eclectic group of people. And when I say eclectic, they are all different backgrounds. The thing that seems to me to be like a uniform element of the Lush folks is they have a lot of ink, and they have a fair amount of body piercings. And one might walk in there initially and say, oh my God, who have they hired? I can guarantee you within 15 to 20 minutes, you would hire any person who works at a Lush store, because they're so rabidly passionate about the store. Lush does a bunch of things. One is it asks everybody who works in this now large international business their opinions about things. That's kind of an interesting idea. But the thing I want you to focus on now is a really interesting idea that has lots of implications that I'd like all of you to think about how it could play out in your companies or organizations. And that is, so Lush has a big campaign. They're trying to be environmentally conscious, and so only half their products have packaging. The other half don't. They're what they call naked products. The half that have packaging are interesting. So this is the Ocean Salt face and body scrub. I actually haven't used this. I think I got this for our daughters. But what I want you to focus on here is, on here, there is a sticker, and that sticker is a guy named Navi. And Navi works at the Lush facility. They call them bakeries. But it's the Lush production plant in Canada, okay? They have a plant in Canada, one in the UK, and then one in Japan for the Asian market. On every single Lush product that they make that has a package, the person who actually made it puts their stamp on it and information, so you know who they are and how to contact them. Is that like a cool idea? I think it's an awesome idea, okay? So you guys, it's early, it's 10 o'clock for some, okay. Why is that like an awesome idea? Because it gets at the heart of what it means to find and keep and motivate people. And it's the very simple notion that what I do matters. That's kind of cool, don't you think? It matters so much that what I do gets kind of put on the stuff that I do. It's me. It's all about me. I really matter. That changes the equation. So I want you to think about that, because we're going to talk about that idea a lot. All of you, I'm imagining, have visions and values, and you're trying to do the right thing, okay? And your visions and values are probably awesome. Your values probably say, God, we treat people wonderfully and we allow the uniqueness of people to come out, okay? We innovate. We adore our customers. Oh, what's another good value? We have high integrity. Those are all great values. We talk about those things all the time. Of course, we're not going to say the opposite, right? How many of you have a website that says, God, we beat the whatever out of our employees. We despise our customers. We use all the worst technology. We never innovate. We don't want to do that. And we have no integrity at all. None of you have that. So I'm assuming your hearts are in the right place, but having your hearts in the right place and actually doing the right thing, those are two different things, okay? And so when I think about Lush, they not only have their hearts in the right place, but they're willing to say, if they value employees, that they're going to let all their employees know they matter to them. So I want you to think about that as we kind of go along. But I want you to think compellingly as you think about the world of work, what really matters to people. And so underlying that is the sense that to live our values means creating a culture, and that culture is really a set of behaviors and actions and kind of the feeling of our place that really shows that our values matter. If I say that our people really matter, that I'm doing things like this to kind of make them kind of come through. If I say that they matter from the moment they arrive, I try to find out what really matters to them and give them assignments that really kind of play to their interests and their strengths. So let's start at the beginning. The reality is that if we all understood the folks who were part of our teams, whether we have 5 people or 5,000, we'd be way better off. We could kind of hit the target of, gee, I suddenly got really big on my computer, but wait a second. I'd like to see the rest of you guys. View, gallery. Okay, I don't know why. There you are. Okay. So if I was able to truly understand what mattered to all of our folks, I would be way better able to make sure that I was doing the right things to kind of keep them engaged and get the most out of them to unlock their genius. But I don't generally take the time to do that. So let's assume this, okay? Whether you have 5 or 500 employees, let's go to a shoe store, okay? So I don't know, you can pick your favorite shoe store, all of you there. And so let's say that we had 100 employees. So I'm going to take you to a shoe store, and I'm going to turn to Scott, was here a while ago. He has like a big foot. And I'm going to say to Scott, okay, here's what I'd like you to do. Scott, I'd like you to pick out a shoe that you really like, and then we're going to measure your foot, okay? And so Scott told me before we got on that he has size 12 shoes. These are 11 and a half. And so let's say Scott liked this shoe, really stylish, okay? This is LL Bean's Maine hiking boot, and it's a shoe that hasn't changed much since 1912, but aside from Scott realizing that retro is kind of hip. Okay, so Scott says he likes this shoe, and he takes a size 12. So I look at my 100 people and I say, awesome. I'd like 100 pairs of the Maine hunting boot in a size 12. And then I hand them out to all of our people, okay? Sounds pretty preposterous, doesn't it? That's exactly how we compensate people, okay? That's exactly how most organizations treat people, is you say to them, well, that's great. We've got kind of a generic way we do things around here. And so there's this salary and these benefits, and that would be great. And, your shoes are waiting for you at your cube or your desk. When I give the shoe example, it sounds kind of absurd. When I think about kind of basic business practices, people go, well, I guess that doesn't make a lot of sense either, but we kind of do that. Here's what I want you to think about, especially in a world that's been changed by COVID, in a world in which everybody quietly is competing for your best people. I want you to think about that. Part of understanding people is getting to know what makes them tick. And as you all know, as you think about all your team members, not the same things make them all tick. Some people want a bit more balance in life. Some people want to learn and grow. Some people want more autonomy. Some people would like to be able to demonstrate that they can take initiative on something that matters to them. Some people would like to go above and beyond what we do as a firm and kind of stretch our thinking in a way which is either good for business in terms of building business, or good for business in terms of building connections and being a better citizen in our community. People want all kinds of different things. Some people would like to learn a skill that actually has nothing on the face of it to do with having to be successful at work. Someone says, well, maybe I'd like to learn a new language or learn to play a musical instrument. The reality is, the more we know people and the more we're willing to kind of tailor the resources we have to help them be great employees and meet some of their needs, the more likely we are to keep them. The more likely they feel that they get to pick size and the pair of shoes that they'd be most comfortable wearing. So I'd love you to think about that simple notion, is that we need to take the time to actually sit down with everybody or Zoom with everybody and find out what really matters to them. We should be asking them what they want to accomplish in the job, what they want to accomplish and they believe they can do for our organization. What are their hopes and dreams about their career and the type of life they'd like to have? We actually ought to have those conversations, because if I have those conversations, now suddenly I know what it's going to take to really energize a person. I'm also likely to know, without getting into a lot of personal stuff, a little bit about the backstory of what really matters to them, and knowing them better as a person enables me to create an environment where I get the best out of them. So I'd love you to think about that. In essence, I'd love you to think about the simple notion that everyone in our organization, if we've hired well, has the potential to be a superhero and do something that really matters to us. We have to figure out what their superpower is. And then we have to support them tied to what we're trying to do. Now, let's pause for a moment and kind of go back to kind of the notion I have when I was talking about Lush. And that notion is, so all of you, I'm guessing all of you are in organizations that have like a vision, right? Yes, kind of, sort of. And all of you think, at least on paper, your vision is pretty awesome, right? Well, how many of you can honestly say that everyone who works in the organization not only knows the vision, but knows where they fit in? All of you? Okay, no, I'll take your words or your nods or whatever you're doing for. So this is the important thing that we need to think about is, well, two things. In order to have a culture that really matters, if we have a vision that matters, we've got to live that vision. We've got to each and every day do things in terms of how we actually behave, in terms of rituals that we have in the organization that actually live up to that vision, that show that we truly aspire to that. But equally, we have to be able to connect the dot. We have to show every person in our organization that what they do, even if they're the newest person or the most junior person or a person who does something that is not absolutely directly tied to kind of how we make money and what we do every day, we need to get them to see the connection between what they do and us being successful. We need everyone to believe that if they don't do their job well and they're not passionate about their job, we can't be successful as an organization. And so that's part of kind of connecting with people. And so I'd love you to kind of think about that. Having said that, I'd like you to think about, and I mentioned kind of COVID, these are 6 things I've been thinking about for a long time. And these, I believe, are 6 things we have to think about as it relates to people and culture and how we find and retain and inspire and unlock the genius in people. And so the first thing I'd like you to think about is the notion that everyone wants to do work that's interesting and matters. So we just talked about the notion of matters, that what I do really matters, but everybody wants to feel when they come in that the work they do is interesting in some way. Here's a simple idea I want you to think about. What if we asked everyone in our organization to figure out how they could be the entrepreneur of their job? okay, how they could literally maximize the value of what they did to our organization and the people we serve or they serve if they have a function that serves people internally. If we were to say, okay, look, you can basically take kind of a clean sheet of paper. I'll talk later about the logic of a clean sheet of paper and how we might approach it, but you can basically take a clean sheet of paper or just imagine if you could be even more awesome at what you do, if your function could be more valuable to the internal or to external customers you serve, what would you do differently? And within reason, I'm willing to support you to do that. The reality is most of the things they'll think about are more a mindset change or a way of doing things change than they are something that requires an awful lot of money or resources. But I'd ask them, what would you do differently? That changes the equation. That also gives them the opportunity to make sure that whatever they do really matters. It matters to them and it matters to the organization. So I'd love to have you think about that kind of simple notion. So the first is doing work that matters and feeling that what I do really matters. And so those are two vitally different things. I have to personally intrinsically feel that what I do is important to the organization. I have to see the connection between what I do and the stuff that I do. We have to, as an organization, value it and make sure that it matters to those we serve. The second thing is people, for the most part, and you'll have a few outliers, people want to learn and grow. Okay. And so as organizations, we need to be committed to them learning and growing. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that we need to figure out what matters most to people, but the reality is that we need to be open to people suggesting to us, these are the things I'd love to learn. I'd love to learn these computer skills, these technology skills. I'd love to learn AI skills. I'd love to learn that new software app that allows me to have all my work written by the computer so I don't have to kind of do that. That would be super cool too. But so we have to really commit to finding out what people want to learn, and then we need to, within reason, support them to kind of learn those things. Remember, when people stop learning, they stop growing and stop moving forward. We want people to think that they're growing with our organization, that our organization is growing and they are vital to growing with our organization. And so that's an important thing. And so I would take the time again. Remember, I mentioned we should sit down with everybody. And part of those conversations is I'd ask them what they want to learn. I'd ask them first what they want to learn that's going to help them be more valuable to our organization. I'd focus primarily on that. But I'd also ask them, are there things you've been dying to learn just in life that are really kind of exciting or important to you that you spend a lot of time thinking about? And then I'd say to myself, to the extent that it's possible to help them do that, even if it means we can give you a few hours one afternoon a week if you'd like to go and take language lessons at the community college. You may not directly use that. I would argue if you're working and living in America and you take Spanish language lessons, you're going to be even more valuable to us than you'd be before. But aside from that, let me find something that they'd like to learn that they're passionate about and figure out some flexible way in a few hours a week to make it possible for them to do that. So learning and growing is an absolutely vital thing. The third thing that people really want, and this is something challenged particularly by this remote world, is people want to have a sense that they belong, okay? We all strive in life to belong, okay? We strive to in life to belong in our social and civic lives. We have organizations and units and groups that we commit and want to belong to. Part of that belonging helps us to feel connected. I believe we've lost a lot of that in the COVID world. I believe that we see people like I see all of you. You look lovely and bright-eyed. But I just see you on a screen, and I may see you on a screen for an hour a week, and I may share some information and check in with you, but do you actually feel like you belong? And so, again, I spend a lot of time talking to people, and I would say to people, tell me how we make sure that you feel comfortable belonging. Is it that you come into the office part of the time? Is that we regularly check in? Is that we do some social things together? Is it that you have a mentor that you actually really like and respect? Lots of you, I don't know how many of you have mentoring, either formal or informal programs in your organizations. The reality is, a lot of the time we assign somebody a mentor who's either A, not a great mentor, or B, doesn't resonate with that person. I want to have a mentor. If you all look back at your careers and say to yourself, this person was a great mentor to me, think about what that involved. Think about how you connected with that person. Think about how you built a special bond. Think about how you belonged because you really felt engaged and part of that person's sphere. We need to find those types of mentors for the people that are part of our organization. Everyone, as part of their learning, should have someone they look up to and respect who's kind of a few steps in the process along the way, farther than they've gotten, that they feel can help to be their guide to where they need to get to. And so I'd love you to think about that. That's all part of the notion of kind of belonging. Now, some of the other things are also tied to belonging, and I'd like you to think about that. But the notion of kind of belonging is fundamentally human, and it's been really frayed in the world of COVID. We used to belong just because we hung out with an awful lot of people. That gave us a sense of belonging. I just don't feel that now. They're not around my dining room table with me. Similarly, organizations, I don't know about your organizations, and I'm trying to look to see how many of you are working from home. Some of you just have a backdrop, so you're tricking me. But the reality is that organizations are doing a mix of really interesting, correct, I think, and really weird things tied to COVID. So most professional organizations have asked people to come back, and on average, as I look at our customers, it's about 2 days a week. Some a bit more, some a bit less. Oddly, I shouldn't say oddly because it might be something your organization's doing, but oddly, I'll still say that, oddly, some organizations have told people, just come in a couple days a week, come in whenever you want to. That's like a really stupid idea. I think we should have people come in a couple of days a week, assuming they feel comfortable. So I mentioned, or I talked to all these Lerch Early people. They're all in, and they're all in separate offices. So we're missing a little bit of this sense of belonging. I don't know. You all put on masks and go to the coffee pot, but whatever the case is, here's what I want you to do. I'd like a couple days a week for people to come in, and during those couple of days, I'd like you to be very thoughtful about what goes on in those couple of days. I think in those couple of days, there should be a shared learning experience because we know learning really matters to people. I believe in those couple of days, people should spend some time with their teams. I believe in those couple of days, they as teams should have challenges to raise the bar in terms of what the team does, to be more innovative, thoughtful, creative, value creating. I believe that if they're going to be mentored, that's an ideal time to do that. I believe they also ought to have some social time together when they come in. And I believe those should be the same days. We know, I won't put words in your mouth, but I sense from talking to all of our customers that if people could have days they didn't come in, they'd be Monday and Friday. Oddly, they wouldn't mind having longer weekends. They could work remotely, go wherever they want, or not have to deal with the stress of it. So that leaves Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as awesome days to get people to kind of come in, but to come in and feel they belong and have a shared experience and connect with the other folks who are like them. I'd like to also, when they come in, organize them so that people who are relatively new get to connect with and meet with the people that are also relatively new, that we build a bond, a camaraderie of kind of younger and junior people. I have the simple idea that I've done in lots of organizations I've worked with, the largest being at the International Monetary Fund, in which I ask people from different departments to get on the calendars of other people and simply have coffee with them, and simply have coffee and get to know them as a person. So if you said to people, come on in, and part of your 2 days a week is you're going to pick 2 other people in the organization you don't know particularly well, and you're just going to have coffee with them and sit down and get to know them, that helps people to belong. The more people I know, the more people I feel connected with, the more I have a sense of belonging. What else should people do? One thing that I don't know that it's just this generation, but I feel really good about a younger generation is that there's an awful lot of people out there who actually want to feel that the organizations who they work for actually care about the communities they work in. They actually do stuff that matters to make their communities better. So I believe that part of what we do in bringing people together is we get them to come together to do good work in our community. I'd love you to think about what your organization does and whether there's a natural connection between what you do and making a difference in the community. We know there's so many needs in every community we have, from at-risk kids to kids who are farther behind because they had to work and study remotely and they didn't have as much access to technology or learning or support as other kids, to people who are homeless or need housing or need a meal or need counseling or coaching or whatever the case is, to environmental issues. There's no shortage of things that people can do together. Our ability to be creative, asking people what really matters to them, and then as an organization creating opportunities for them to do that, is going to give them not only a sense of belonging, but a sense that we're a good place to work because we actually care about more than just making money and doing our business. So I'd love you to think about that. That's a really important thing to think about. So the whole idea of kind of doing good together. I believe we should periodically, and you can decide whether it's once a week or once a month or whatever the case is, again, tied to your organization and its culture, we ought to have fun together. Okay. And so people ought to have fun together. And fun is actually an important part of business, actually. So, we think, well, that's a little bit frivolous. I think we have to kind of ramp up the stuff that's a little bit more frivolous. So we ought to do fun things. And those fun things, some of them can be just having fun. We bring in food, or we go out somewhere, or we go to a concert or a play, or we go to Top Golf, or we go on go-karts, or we go bowling. Bowling's a great equalizer because there are only a few people who are always really good at bowling. And the rest of the people, if they get a strike or a spare, they're happy. So that's like an easy thing to do. But I believe we ought to have fun together. Now, tied to the whole notion of fun, I actually have designed something that we do with a lot of our customers that's super fun. It's called, you can go to our website, it's called Team Learning Adventures, but it's a program we've designed in which we literally take teams of people from organizations, anywhere from 10 to, we've done it up to 200 people, exploring the world around them as teams, going to museums, cool businesses, getting ideas for how to energize their own business. And it's an awful lot of fun. And so it's a combination of kind of learning and kind of having fun together. And the reality is, it really helps to build these bonds that are important to getting people to kind of stay connected. It's a wonderful way to get people who don't hang out with each other to actually work together. So having fun together is important. The sixth thing that I'd love you to think about is the whole notion of how do we help people balance work and life? And so the reality is, if we've learned anything from COVID, it's that people have struggled to kind of keep up their lives and keep working, and that some measure of work-life balance is important. That can take all different forms, but part of it is, again, appreciating people as people and having an organizational culture that says when challenges or opportunities come up, we're more flexible with them about giving them the time to do things in another aspect of their life that are going to make them happier and more complete. And so we ought to be doing that. Tied to almost all the things I'm saying, beginning with the notion of getting to know people, hopefully you're kind of hearing underneath that the idea of flexibility, okay? And that is, again, let's go back to my shoe. One size really doesn't fit all. I mean, these shoes would be great for Scott, actually, if he likes this style of shoe, and they're waterproof actually as well. But the reality is, one size doesn't fit all. And so our ability to understand people and what's unique to them and all these things we do, and to be somewhat flexible, really matters. Let's say we have a person who, in their effort to strike balance, wants to go to a yoga or a Zumba class because that would be important to them, and it's offered during work hours. My guess is, if we said that's fine with us, that's great. It's going to allow you to strike some balance. We don't worry that you're going to get your work done. I believe they'd really love us they'd really have a bit more balance and they'd still get their work done. So I'm not so worried about now. Mark's and Paul are employment lawyers, so they may say, God, now that's a can of worms here, Gregerman. What are you doing? But I believe we got to be flexible. We're in an era where we need to be a little bit more flexible, and we need to appreciate people as people. I mean, we've all, let's be honest, we've all been through a lot in the last couple of years, and I think we've all got to recognize that all of us have different ways to find the balance that we need. And as long as we can kind of do great work for an organization and we feel that the organization is supporting us to be a person and do the things we want to do, I think we ought to be flexible about that. Is that legally, are we allowed, Mark and Paul, to do that? Can we do that?
Yeah, I think you're doing fine, Alan. Paul,
Okay, I haven't said anything that's illegal, I hope, have I? The last thing I want is employment lawyers to suddenly say, God, don't say that. Okay. Anyway, so balancing work and life. And again, remember, we talked about earlier, it's going to be a bit different for everyone. Someone's caring for older parents. Someone has kids at home. Someone has some health issues in which they need to kind of deal with that. Ultimately, we want to do all these things so that we help people to find a balance so that they can bring their best to work. They feel we're a place that appreciates them as a person, is supporting them to do great work and supporting them to be a great human being. And we're all about doing that. So now let me go back. So I mentioned a while ago that I gave you all the benefit of the doubt that you all had incredible visions and values for your organization. Now what I want to talk about is one of the things Mark wanted me to talk about, and it's a super important topic, and it's a topic I love, is the idea of how do we build a culture that really kind of retains people. So I'm hoping, as you're hearing the things that we're talking about, I'm hoping that all of you are saying, so those in a way are some elements of a culture, those tied to the values that we have. So now I want to go back to a point that's really important is I have rarely ever been invited into an organization that didn't have a vision and values. And I've rarely ever been invited to an organization in which their vision and values didn't on the face of it sound really good. Where culture comes in is if our values are strong, do we actually live those? And do we live those from the top of our organization, the leaders, on down to the bottom? Do we live those in all of our behaviors? Do we live those in how we engage with all of our people? That's what a culture is. And the reality is people say, what do you think of the culture here? And I say, just let me spend a week in your organization and then I'll have a pretty darn good idea because I'll see how people interact with each other. I'll see how people behave. I'll see when you say that the customer matters, whether people are jumping through hoops to deliver value for the customer, whether from the top to the bottom of the organization, we've convinced people that customers really matter, and we should go out of our way to kind of treat customers the way we'd like to be treated ourselves. I used to give an example, and some of you may be able to kind of see this now, and maybe this is also a function of COVID. I think it's also a function of the fact they were bought by Amazon, but I used to absolutely love Whole Foods, not because I could spend more there than I could spend anywhere else, but they did one thing that was particularly remarkable, and I'd love you to think about that. So think back to the older days, and I'm assuming all of you have shopped at Whole Foods, yes? Yeah. Okay. And so think back to the olden days of Whole Foods when they actually cared about customers because they had this compassionate mission, and that mission was to get more people to eat natural and organic foods. Kind of an interesting idea, yes? We now know that whether we should eat Beyond Burgers or not, we should all be a bit more plant-based. We'll live longer, but I'll leave that to all of you. In our personal assessment, you can tell me whether you want to live longer and eat more plant-based food, and we'll find you a cooking class. But having said that, so what did Whole Foods do before it became Amazonitized? It did the following. Let's say you were in a Whole Foods store and you needed a product, okay? And you didn't know where that product was. Unlike at Giant or Safeway or Jewel in Chicago or Albertsons, if you live wherever you live, if you went into a store and you said to an associate in one of those other stores, can you tell me where the prune juice is? The associate said, I don't know. Aisle 24, there's like a directory up here. Just go west for a while, turn right, it's somewhere down there. If you asked somebody in Whole Foods where the prune juice was, they were required not only to take you there, but once they got you there, do you have any questions about prune juice? So they literally would drop what they were doing and take you to the prune juice and say, do you have any questions? To which I would say, I don't know, does it work? No, seriously. Okay. Now, what I was always amused by was the fact that the prune juice, because it's a slow-moving item, was on the top shelf, and all of the people who wanted it were generally women who were like 5 feet tall. They probably were taller in an earlier life, who couldn't reach it, because I was regularly asked to get a prune juice down for people. But the folks at Whole Foods would ask you if you had any questions, and if they didn't know the answer, they were required to find a colleague who knew more about prune juice than they did. That's kind of awesome, isn't it? But the key thing that I want you to think about is they never let the customer down. They never let the customer out of their sight till they solve their problem. That's what in business we call sticking to the customer. So if your value is that we truly value or adore our customers, do we create a culture in which you have your version of sticking with the customer? Or do we wait and not get an answer to the customer and then respond later? Or things that we serve the customer are unclear, or our bills are met. So how does that trickle down to everything we do? That's what a culture is all about. It's everybody saying, you know, the customer's on the phone, it's really important, or the customer's at the front door. So it's living that. Similarly, if we say our people really matter, then we really need to do some of the things that we've talked about today. Is we really need to start and say to all of our people, what matters to you? You matter to us. It's one of our values. What matters to you? We're going to try to accommodate you doing remarkable things for us, with us supporting your ability to do the things that matter to you. So I want you to think about kind of that. If we say that we're going to be innovative, how often do we say we're going to be innovative, and then somebody comes to one of the boss's doors and says, I have this idea, I think we can be better at that. And the boss says, that's kind of a stupid idea, or, you know, we really can't do that, or why in the world would we do that? If we really believe that innovation matters, we do things that energize people to be innovative. We actually commit to doing that. So people see that, they walk in the door, they sense innovations going on. They sense us testing things. They see new ideas that we have. We have things going on in our office that spark their thinking. We do those things. So culture is about not just saying things, but actually living things. Culture is really the behaviors we demonstrate. If we say that technology matters to us, that we want to use the latest technology to create value for customers, are we regularly bringing in technology and inviting everybody to try it out and getting their feedback and seeing what stuff makes sense? We got to live the stuff that we do. That's really kind of what culture is all about. And now remember, let's now kind of make a loop here and say, when we talk about culture today as it relates to people, let's go back to the simple notions. We begin by understanding what matters to them. Then we commit to making sure that they believe the work they do matters, and that we make every job meaningful in our organization. We create a direct connection between them and what we're trying to accomplish as an organization, and we regularly encourage them to be even better and better at what we do. We challenge them to think that you don't just have to be at the front line of our products to actually be entrepreneurial and making us better. And we want you to do that. That's part of how we live our values. That's our culture. Do we have a culture in which we're learning? Are we creating learning events? Whether they're online or in person, are we doing learning things? Are we asking people, what do they want to learn this year? And then supporting their ability to do that. That's part of what it really means to create a culture that lives these things. If it's a culture that's belonging, do we reach out to people? I would argue, oddly, it's a really strange thing to say, that one of the things that COVID and Zoom and all these things have allowed us to do is we can talk to everybody, even people who are in different locations of our company, anytime we want to. Are we regularly checking in with them? Are we regularly making sure that they belong? Are we figuring out other people they should be connected with in the organization and connecting them? Are we sending a note to 2 people who should be connected, who could belong more if we did it, and say, you know, sending you a note, you guys ought to have virtual coffee together. And if you're in the same location, have actual coffee together, and I'll pay for the coffee. You know, there's no cost for coffee that I can't imagine doing if it brings people together, you know, so why not do that? So I'd love you to kind of think about that simple notion. Are we, so learning, belonging, Are we committing as a culture? If we say that we really care about the communities we work in, what are we doing? How do we engage people? One of the things I love about Lush, so go into a Lush store, wherever you are, and you're going to notice that there's a table at Lush, which is kind of the volunteer organizations of the month, in which the folks at Lush don't just give the profits from those products, but they identify certain products, and all of the revenue from those products that month they give to that nonprofit organization, and they create volunteer opportunities. Where did that list of organizations come from? They asked all their employees. Okay, they asked all their employees, and the idea was over time, each employee's organization that mattered to them would be the focus of a monthly contribution. That's kind of a cool and simple idea. You guys can do that. You have no excuse for not doing that. So how do we do that? Do we have fun together? So I want you to think about, and do we commit? If we say that balance matters, are we more flexible at those times? Not all the time, because then somebody's taking advantage of us, but at those times when it really matters to somebody, are we flexible enough to help them to kind of do that? Now, let me make another connection, and then, geez, we're almost in. I want to take time for questions. I also want to say to all of you, because we may not get to all your questions, if you have a question and we haven't covered it and we don't get to it, reach out to me. You can connect with me. Mark knows how to find me, or LinkedIn or whatever, or send me an email. We can connect. I'm glad to be responsive to you. I also have written on these topics an ebook, and if you'd like that, just connect with me and say you'd be interested in that, and I'll send it to you. It has more detail. Okay, so this is the world. Well, it's a soft version of the world. Okay, good. So the world is moving super fast. Let's be honest, okay? And I don't care what business you're in, all of you have the potential to be disrupted, whether it's the legal business or the insurance business or the computer business or any business or the property management business or any type of business. You have the potential to be disrupted. You can't afford to allow that to happen. It's another reason you need to have great employees, and you need to inspire them to always be thinking and always be paying attention. You and your team need to regularly get out there and see what's going on in the world so you don't miss anything. You need to see what technologies are going on in the world that could potentially disrupt you. You need to challenge all of your people to regularly say, what can we do so that nobody can steal our business from us? What's going on in the world? You really need to do that. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that part of the reason why we want to keep engaged people and build the right culture is so people all feel a commitment to banding together to protect our enterprises and make sure that we grow. And so that's the idea of the world. I mentioned earlier, I take teams out. You could take your team out regularly just to see what's going on outside your building. We have a tendency, we hang out in our offices, we have a tendency to just keep thinking like we've always been thinking. Got us through the day. You know, we got an inbox, we got to get through that stuff. And so the reality is, if we just stay in our office, we don't change our thinking or our frame of mind. We got to get out there periodically and see what's going on out there that should change the way we think about stuff. Minimally, we'll think about all the people who are changing as customers. They're becoming younger. They're becoming more diverse. They have all kinds of different needs. We need to be open to all of that. We have some different projects which are interesting. We were asked by Mercedes-Benz to help them figure out why young people weren't buying their cars. First, they were too expensive. Second, they were kind of boring for young people. Third is, most importantly, they really didn't understand young people very much. The folks at Audi and BMW had spent a lot of time thinking about young people. So we had to think about it. And if you looked at the last few years of Mercedes, they're a reflection of the fact that the world is getting younger, and we've got to make cars that are more responsive in terms of technology and how they look to younger people. So I'd love for you to think about the world changing, get yourself a globe, and never forget that you've always got to stay a couple steps ahead of folks who are out there trying to steal or eat your lunch. The best way to think about the fact that the world is changing, how many of you this past weekend, let me look closely, how many of you went to Blockbuster Video to rent a video? Wait, no, you didn't. Scott, you went to Blockbuster?
I'm like 42 years old.
Okay, yeah. Is there, where did you, but anyway, okay, so it used to be, so here's the video, Meet the Fockers. It's actually a pretty funny movie. I'm shocked this didn't win the Academy Award. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so, you know, at its height, there were 9,000 Blockbuster stores. That's kind of amazing, isn't it? And their revenues were like $6 billion a year. Okay. You know how many Blockbuster stores there are now? There's one. It's actually in Bend, Oregon. I guess it's a place where people have nothing better to do than go to a video store, or maybe they have bad Wi-Fi connection. So Blockbuster was all the rage. Like, we all went there. They had movies, candy, whatever. Then this guy came along with a really lame idea. Okay. And what was that? That was Netflix. Okay. And their idea was, you know, you go online, you create a list of movies you'd like to see, and they'll actually mail you a DVD. That's, in today's standards, that's pretty darn lame, isn't it? Right? 8 Blockbusters launched. That was pretty darn good. But if the folks at Netflix had simply decided just to keep mailing you videos, and having said that, there still are 2 million people that have Netflix mail them videos. They probably live in Bend, Oregon, or wherever they live. Probably not in the DMV. We're a little bit hipper than that. But if they just kept doing that, they would not have survived. Okay, so what did the folks at Netflix do? They realized that a technology had happened, and that technology was streaming, right? And so people had a desire to get the entertainment they wanted like instantly. And so Netflix had to do streaming, okay? But they weren't the only people doing streaming. There are lots of places you can stream. And as all of you know from all your organizations, if you can't provide compelling value, you're forced to be a commodity enterprise. So the reality was, as Netflix started competing with the Hulus and the Rokus and all these other people, they had to sharpen their pencils. They had to reduce their price. They had to figure out, how do we stay in business and make money? And so Netflix created their 4th generation of what they do. And that was, they created content, right? And so they had to say, the reason you come to us is not just because you can stream everything, but because we have stuff that other people don't have. We have proprietary content. Anybody want to guess how much money Netflix spent on content last year? $17 billion. That was the cost to play in this game now. The key point is this: in order to remain relevant in anything we do, we have to continue to up our game. We need all of our best people to up our game. We need to hire, retain, and inspire people. If I need to be a bit more flexible, and I need to engage people differently, and I need to actually, God help me, take the time to get to know everybody, find out what makes them tick, and what it takes to inspire them to do awesome things, I ought to do it. I've talked for too long. I hope this was useful. I mean, I could be here for days. I'd love to share more ideas, but do you have any questions? We'll get to those. And if not, reach out to me. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for being here.